Welcome to another presentation for our Sound Healing Conference. Today we have Alexandre Tannous. Alexandre is an ethnomusicologist, sound therapist, and sound researcher. He's been investigating the therapeutic and esoteric properties of sound from three different perspectives: Western scientific, Eastern philosophical, and shamanic societal beliefs, to gain a deeper understanding of how and to what extent sound has been used to affect human consciousness. This search has led him to the intersection of art, science, philosophy, and spirituality. The material he transmits about sound is based on multidisciplinary research over 20 years, observations he made during his field work in over 40 countries, scientific studies, personal experiences, and data collected from thousands of people he has worked with doing sound therapy. This has led him to a deeper understanding of how sound reveals and unlocks hidden powers we have within us to promote profound inner transformation and healing. His site is soundmeditation.com. Welcome.
Thank you, David. Great to
What
be
have,
here.
what have you been up to lately?
A lot going deep into my research, teaching a lot online, and doing collaborations, and working with some people in the right protocol, the right set and setting. It's important to keep this work going, but of course, while being safe. And preparing online courses, symposia, and conferences, being part of them. You have to adapt and roll with things.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Are you going to talk about some of your research that you've been doing?
Yes, exactly.
Cool. That's really interesting to me. Um, so I've got one big question I'm asking everybody, and that is, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do to help people on the planet, and possibly with sound?
Yeah, great question. It will definitely be with sound, which is basically to raise a greater level of awareness of what sound can do for us right now, how it can serve us, but also to promote the right approach to use it with authenticity, with rigor, and to do the inner work. Sound, music is the most powerful practice, most powerful art, accessible art for many, many reasons. And I will be talking about these aspects. So I would definitely promote sound, create many documentaries that would bring awareness to people to really develop the understanding and how to use it in the most proper way, most suitable way without calling it something else, and how to engage people because sound is the number one tool that unravels consciousness, acoustical aspect of physics, um, the acoustic of sound, the pure harmony, the harmonic series. I'll talk about all these things in a bit, are very, very important to tell us about who we are, but we need to use them as tools to get us to something that already exists within us.
Perfect.
Thank you.
What is your presentation on today?
My presentation is a big chunk of my research. I will go fairly deep, but not too deep. It's if I were to really flesh out, it'll take about 20 hours to go into all of these things, but it's going to be succinct, but yet to give people a notion about what I've been working on, a certain part of my research, not the entire thing. And if people are interested, they can go to my website, soundmeditation.com, where I have a lot of videos, a lot of content, a sample of my writing, my research, and huge section of resources. Yeah, and my approach to working with sound, given the background that I've had, which I'll talk a little bit about my background and why I do things the way I do them in the beginning of my presentation. But my presentation basically would be, as the title is, on sound, consciousness, and spirituality. I'm deeply interested in this intersection because sound is the most powerful tool to, again, unravel the nature of our consciousness, the divine, and the human nature and our connection to the universe and to the intelligence in nature, in our nature.
Cool. Cool. Wow, I'm excited. I can't. I have a feeling we're going to be talking at the end a good amount when you're done here, because it's right down our alley. We've got the Sound Healing Research Foundation as well. So, okay, I go ahead and begin if you like.
So I'm going to share my screen. If you may make me, I guess here, I need, if you can disable. Okay, sorry, it's been disabled. Here I'm getting a message.
Hmm.
If you can make me a host so I can share my screen, please.
Oh, you should be able to share anyway. Should be already set up. No?
No, it's still giving me
Okay.
host is set,
I'll make you
disabled participant.
I'll make you the host. They changed it. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, now it works. Thank you. All right. Here we go. So a little bit about my style in talking. Um, for the participants who are not familiar with my work in my way of addressing complex things. If you hear me jumping from one thing to another, zooming in, zooming out, connecting dots, I'm not rambling, I'm not digressing, I'm not getting lost. I do this on purpose because the approach that I take to research and understand something so complex as sound, and the participants know how complex this power is. I do this on purpose to show you the complexity, the beauty, the interconnectedness, the holographic aspect of understanding sound and how it connects to just about anything we go through in our life. So please realize that I'm doing this on purpose, and I always manage to connect the dots and to make things gel, so to speak. So a little bit about my training, um, so that you understand why I take this approach. I've been deeply interested in meditation, Eastern philosophies, something I started at age 14, so that shaped my life. And of course, the practice of playing, studying music over the years since I was a kid shaped so much the way my brain works. And as we know, neuroplasticity is very important. And if we do something repeatedly, as the saying goes, neurons that fire together wire together. So some of the things also that affected the way I perceive sound, I think about it, are all the things that I've been interested in: Gnosticism, Hermeticism, Neoplatonism, Pythagoreanism, esoteric and occult philosophies and practices, the modern mystery schools, theosophy and anthroposophy. Anthroposophy is the school that Rudolf Steiner created. He's the one who also created biodynamic farming and Waldorf School, and also ancient mystery schools. And I studied music over 12 years. I did 4 degrees in music, and I studied deeply performance, different instruments, trained classically, but I also studied jazz, and of course, like everyone else, played different musical styles. And I studied conducting, composition theory, and one of my degrees is in music education, and I was specialized in ethnomusicology. I have 2 degrees in ethnomusicology, which is a field that studies music as a sociocultural phenomenon. And the ultimate goal is to understand human beings by studying culture through music. So clearly, my drive to understand why music is powerful, why is it the most popular art, is really important. And even though I did 4 degrees over 12 years, and I taught music for years. I used to teach at Columbia University. I started this research on the therapeutic and esoteric properties of sound because I still had a lot of questions that were not answered. Still had strong intuition making me feel that there is still something really gargantuan that we have not understood yet. Even though I loved every aspect of all the things that I did, little by little, I started changing my interest and started putting more effort and time, energy, a lot of my resources to go deep into this research, which initially was just for me. I didn't want to have another specialization. I've already gathered many hats to wear, and I loved each one. Eventually, I ended up quitting all the things the wonderful things I used to do, being a musician, composer, conductor. I composed contemporary classical music and film music, teaching at university level. So now I'm a freelancer full-time, going deep into various aspects connected to the therapeutic and the esoteric properties of sound. So today you'll get a little snippet of this research going deep into some concepts that people may know and some may be foreign to people. Now, um, I'm aware that there would be various levels of achievement in the practitioners and the people interested in this conference watching my talk. Naturally, there may be some things that are being repeated, but I still want to cover the basis and make sure I'm connecting things properly. But if there are a lot of new concepts, please realize that some of this material would need some digging in, some personal research. And if you feel that you're getting only 80%, 60% out of it, given how abstruse and convoluted it is, it's totally fine. Just research it, go deep into it, preserve a healthy level of skepticism. Even my talk, it's very important to research and go deep into things because of certain matters that I will address in a bit. So it is a dense one, but very worthy of attention. I'm going to start with this quote first. Sometimes people hold a core belief that is very strong. When they are presented with evidence that works against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It would create a feeling that is extremely uncomfortable called cognitive dissonance. And because it is so important to protect the core belief, they will rationalize, ignore, and even deny anything that doesn't fit with the core belief. Frantz Fanon, he was a psychiatrist, philosopher, humanist, and an amazing person from Martinique. And I love this quote because this is something that we're having to face so much on many levels, which is telling us something about reality. We become attached to the reality that we are entrained in, we are imprinted with, we are educated, indoctrinated. All of these things create and shape reality. So it's very important to review, reassess, and challenge old beliefs. And God knows there's so much of them in sound. Why? Because it's a very, very powerful tool. We're deeply attracted to it. It serves us in a wide variety of different ways. It's the force, the power behind music. So naturally, we're going to have different understanding. And given that it's not a field that's been taken as seriously as it should be taken, we're getting there little by little. So it's normal to have many different interpretation, different versions of understanding. They're all basically, everyone is trying to look at something so magnificent through different lenses, filters, and angles. It's kind of like 100 blind people trying to describe an elephant by touching different aspects of the elephant, you know the saying. So I'm going to start with mathematics of in nature and talk about their importance. There's a reason why I'm doing this, and then you'll know this later. I want to start with certain mathematical constants that occur in nature. Mathematical constants are numbers that and systems that exist in nature that we can't change. We can't change them because they're fixed numbers, and these things are telling us about the nature of the universe. The two most popular mathematical constants are pi, what we use to calculate the circumference of a circle, and phi, the golden mean, the golden ratio. Fractal geometry is a branch of mathematics concerned with irregular patterns made of parts that are in some way similar to the whole, e.g. twigs and tree branches, a property called self-similarity or self-symmetry. I'm going to play a short video to show you what fractal geometry is about. So as we zoom in on the tiniest part, this is the Mandelbrot set. This branch in mathematics was discovered by French mathematician in the 60s. His name is Benoit Mandelbrot, and came to the US in the late 60s and started working with IBM and furthered computing. So as you see, as we're zooming into the tiniest part, we have some sort of self-similarity, self-symmetry. And this, according to mathematics, goes on to infinity. And this is something that tells us about how nature and the mathematics the fractal geometry is big part of nature and reality. The discovery of fractal geometry allowed us to create the software through which we create computer-generated imagery, which create reality in films. In sci-fi films, all of these things that you see, they're not real, they're created with fractal geometry software. So this can go on for many more minutes, and there are now on YouTube three-dimensional ones. Going to move on to the Fibonacci sequence, another mathematical constant. It was a series of numbers with surprisingly useful applications in botany and other natural sciences. So basically the system is very easy. It's 1 plus 1 equals 2, and then 2 plus the previous number was 3, 3 plus the previous number, 2 equals 5, and you get a series of 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, so on and so forth. There's another mathematical concept called the Fibonacci, but we're not going to mention it now. Let's stick with Fibonacci. And Fibonacci's sequence causes these nautilus shell chambers to grow bigger and bigger to give us this beautiful spiral, this symmetry, this balance. That is something that we found in so many things in nature. Here, for example, the petals of the succulent follow this Fibonacci. Why? Because it's a very important system for the plant to survive, so that the petals, whether on a succulent or any flower or plant, to grow in a way where they don't obstruct entirely or mostly the leaf that is underneath. Why? Because the plant needs photosynthesis, which is absorbing sunlight and absorbing carbon dioxide and water. And with these three things, the plants create all the sugars and the chemicals to survive without needing behavior. So they rely on photosynthesis. And as we know, plants communicate with each other. Symbiosis is very important, which is not based on the dominance of the more powerful one, but it's some network of negotiation and trading stuff. Even with bees and insects, they create the nectar that bees and certain birds come to feed on so that they can pollinate others. So it's basically chemicals to trade with. It's their currency. And they've evolved a great degree of intelligence. Here also we see in the pine cone the different diagonals, and in the sunflower, this is all Fibonacci. These are the patterns. And this is Romanesco broccoli. And we also see similar patterns in the seeding of mosques, things related to fractal geometry, Fibonacci series, golden mean, golden ratio. And not only mosques, these three images are taken from mosques, but it's something that we see in Jewish temples, in churches, cathedrals, and mosques. It's a reference to the intelligence in the universe that becomes part of the perception, the understanding, the experience with God or the divinity. Phi, the golden mean, the golden ratio. By the way, what I just presented is something that these three last slides, something that I can take very deeply to a 6-hour-long presentation. So it's a deep rabbit hole, but basically it's about how now we misunderstand the divine and what we made of the divine, but I'm talking about where this concept of divine comes from and its connection to the intelligence in nature and the way it's exhibited and in the universe. And I'm going to connect that to sound later on. So that's coming. So please bear with me. Phi, the golden mean, the golden ratio, the golden number, it's been given many names as the constant of the universe, which is an infinite non-repeating number, also the number that's responsible for the spiral. Cymatics, probably a lot of people know about cymatics, is the study of visible sound and vibration. It was discovered by Ernst Chladni, who was a German physicist and musician. He's sometimes called the father of acoustics. What Chladni did, basically, he took a square piece of metal, thin metal, and he took a violin bow and bowed the edge of this plate, thin plate, while putting fine powder, salt, or very fine sand on it. And because the bow catches the prime resonant frequency on the plate, the sand moves, and here you see it, you see specific image. It moves from the areas that are vibrating the most and collects in the areas that are vibrating the least, and it gives us a specific image. Now, this image changes. It's not always the same based on the frequency. It is dependent on variables, humidity, temperature, what kind of powder, and so many things. So people should not be reductionists here, that one frequency always gives you the same image. The next slides are showing you cymatics, but with water here. These are some photos taken from the wonderful book, Water Sound Images by Alexander Lauterwasser, who is a cymatic researcher and photographer, showing us that they're not just two-dimensional patterns, they're three-dimensional. Most likely they're more than three-dimensional. This is, we're looking at hyperdimensional geometry, but we're only able to witness the three-dimensional aspect. Basically, you have a glass bowl in a dark room, and there's a spotlight underneath it, and this spotlight, you know, he puts different filters. Sometimes it's blue, sometimes orange or yellow, red, and a camera on top to show you the third dimensional aspect. This is what we're looking at. You can go to cymatics.org and see a lot of these patterns that we can get from liquids and putty as well. This here, of course, looks like the sunflower that you saw earlier, or also can look like mandalas, yeah, which are part of many different cultures, not only Tibetan, Hindu, Buddhist, but also African indigenous beliefs and Vodou, Santeria, Candomblé. This is also cymatics pattern. And this is a short video. I'm not going to play the whole thing, showing you more complex patterns. This is a snippet, a montage of different studies by my friend Gabriel Kelemen, Kelemen. He's one of the leading cymatic researchers. The sounds that you're hearing are not really the sound that are driving the visuals. It's something that he created later on in the video. And so basically, you can find his research online if you type his name, and check out his book as well. He's working on a second book, very cutting edge research on how and to what extent sound creates patterns, and this idea that the world is made of sound and how it can correlate to many shapes, many things that we see, whether the ear, the way the ear is shaped, the cartilage, the shape of the organs within us, the kidneys, etc. He shows us the correlation between the two. His background is an art historian and an artist, and he discovered cymatics and became his thing. I'm gonna stop the video here because you can view it online and go deep into it. I just wanted to mention something. This is Alexander Lauterwasser again, correlating shapes that we see in cymatics with tortoise shell, or could be a leopard pattern or a zebra pattern. So cymatics should be taken seriously, clearly, far more than we already know. Harmonic series, this is what I want to focus on, which is one of the most important mathematical constants and the driving power behind sound and the place where the concept of harmony comes from. A harmonic, or an overtone, is any frequency higher than the fundamental frequency of a sound. The fundamental and the overtones together are called partials. Harmonics are partials whose frequencies are integer multiples of the fundamental. These overlapping terms are variously used when discussing the acoustic behavior of musical instruments. I want to make a distinction that a harmonic is not the same as overtone. There's a difference between them, but I'm not going to go deep into this. However, they both can be the frequency above from the fundamental frequency. Why does this series exist? To give us the tone color of any instrument, any voice, any sound that we hear. So basically, we would have a fundamental tone or fundamental frequency, Let's say you play a note C on a piano and you compare that same C, let's say first C above middle C on a piano with the flute C and the oboe C. They're the same frequency, but the sound is different. The timbre, the tone color is different because the harmonic series, these frequencies that are coloring the sound are different from one note to another. And that is caused by the shape of the instrument that dictates what kind of tone color. And this series goes on to infinity. And there's specific spacing between them. The same thing with our voices. Our voices have different timbres and tone colors. Each person has a different signature in their voice because the area in the vocal tract is different from one person to another. One person may have a wider throat, narrower throat, bigger vocal cords, smaller, bigger uvula, smaller soft palate, higher rooftop of mouth or the hard palate, bigger tongue, smaller teeth. All of these things create specific conditions that when the sound is amplified because of the vibration of our vocal cords, this vibration is amplified in a very unique way given all the different variables. And the variables create the timbre of all of our voices. And this is very important. So this is what is responsible for the harmonic series. But it's also the place where the concept of harmony comes from. It's something that's encoded within us. I'm going to play a short video. For those of you who can't read musical notation, it's okay. You can follow the notes. I'm going to play this video, which goes up to the 16th partial, not the 20th. But you can see here the fundamental frequency, which is the C toward the left, a very low C on piano. And then what you have number 2, 3, 4, 5 going to 20th, these are the partials. So that C, the second C is an octave higher. It's where the frequency doubles. It's the second partial or the first overtone, okay, or a first harmonic. And it goes on to infinity. And there's a specific spacing. The first interval is an octave. The second one is a perfect fifth. And that is that this is in between C and G or D and A. And the next interval between G and C is a fourth because it's G, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the next one is a major third and then a minor third. It goes on to infinity. And these intervals go to smaller and smaller and smaller degrees, and they go on to infinity. A tone color of any particular instrument or voice is basically which frequencies from the harmonic series are present in that sound, which ones are absent, and of the ones that are present, to what levels of strength and weakness they are present to dictate the tone color, the coloring of the tone, the timbre. You also realize that these notes have fluctuating integer numbers on top of them. These are cents, basically. So that first G plus 2 cents, every time the G occurs in the series, it's 2 cents higher than the perfect tuning G on a piano. Let's say you have a piano and it's perfectly in tune, that G will be 2 cents lower than the G in the harmonic series. What's a cent? A cent is a unit used for logarithmic measurement of sound. And I will talk about this later. The E is minus 14 cents. So this E in the natural harmonic series would be 14 cents flatter than the keyboard piano perfectly in tune, equal tempered E. So on and so forth. Some of them deviate up to minus 49, that G flat, the 11th partial. So now I'm going to play it. So you will see a circle going around the notes. And if you hear these notes a little out of tune, this is actually the right tuning. We may hear them out of tune because we are accustomed to the equal temperament, which quantized the system. And I'll talk about this in a bit. Here we go. So when we hear these harmonics coming from a gong, singing bowl, overtone singing, didgeridoo, disc bell, any of these instruments that emit the harmonic overtones to clearly audible level, because the harmonic overtones are everywhere all the time. We don't always hear them when we play a note on the flute, a note on an oboe or a piano, because the fundamental frequency is so loud it overshadows, it masks the higher overtones. But if you were to do harmonic spectrum analysis, which I'll show you later, you will see them. But humans everywhere in the world, when they want to use sound as a therapeutic modality, they gravitate toward instruments where you can clearly audibly hear these overtones to various levels. And these instruments would be shakers, rattles, instruments that have buzzing in them, like the tanpura in Indian classical music, which is played on purpose so that the singers and the instrumentalists can tune their notes, their intervals, to pure harmony without any adulteration, so that they create resonance, so that they be as close as possible to the harmony that nature gave us in the harmonic series, which is everywhere and encoded within us. When musicians play fretless instruments such as double bass, cello, viola, violin, even though they're conservatory trained, they still play in non-equal temperament. The equal temperament is a system that gave us many advantages. We created it, and it quantized the octave, the distance between one note and another. So the octave in the West is equal to 12 semitones, and let's call them 12 tones. The C to C sharp to D, D to T sharp, these are the smallest steps. The half step, the distance between one fret on the guitar, the next fret up or down, one key on the piano and the next key up or down, whether it's black or white. This is the smallest division of sound in the Western harmonic system, not in other harmonic systems in the world. So other harmonic systems, Indian, for example, is equal to 22. Arabic and Persian is equal to 24 tones per octave. Turkish is 53. The Byzantine chants, which are used in the Greek Orthodox Church, the octave is divided into 72 tones. So, and sometimes it's 7 and 5, like the Balinese. But I'm not only talking about the number of divisions. What I'm talking here about is the quantization, the snapping into grid. Now, this system, the equal temperament, gave us some advantages, allowed us to be able to tune a piano to one tuning by creating equidistancy, where each half step becomes equal to 100 cents. And the entire octave is 1200 cents. In a non-equal tempered octave, not all half steps are equal to 100 cents. Some maybe 97.35, some 101.6. I'm making up numbers just to tell you that they're not really all 100 cents. So that system allowed us to tune a piano to one tuning and be able to transpose a piece of music from one system, from one key to any other key. If you try to do this with a piano that is tuned to non-equal temperament, you can only transpose the piece of music, which means moving the tonal center to neighboring keys. If you go to distant keys, the piece of music will start to sound out of tune. Why? Because you're tempering with the mathematics of the octave. What binds this infinite series, the harmonic series, basically are mathematical ratios. Mathematical ratios is what we find in between the notes, where the musical intervals. The octave is 2-to-1 ratio. Perfect fifth is a 3-to-2 ratio. Major second, the distance between C and D and D and E, that's a 9-to-8 ratio. So basically the harmonic series is the audible side of these mathematical ratios, and that's the connection between music and mathematics. This is a very, very deep rabbit hole. I'm going to stop here, because if I go any deeper, I would need plenty of time to explicate things. Otherwise, I would lose most people. If you want to learn more about the equal temperament, this is a very good book, How Equal Temperament Ruined Harmony and Why You Should Care. So humans basically are encoded with this intelligence to use overtone emitting instruments and go to great lengths. It's not easy to create a gong, to make a gong or singing bowl, a disc and bell. You need specific proportions of metals, especially tin and copper, certain proportion. To make singing bowls, you need 20 to 22% tin and 75 to 77% copper to create bell quality bronze. People think that there's 7 metals, there's 2 metals. There are about 5, 6 metals found there in close to 1% as impurities, okay? They're not all 7 metals. So one can add different elements to enhance this resonance, but basically we create these instruments so that when we play them, we can hear the overtones, and that changes everything. Now you can do this with plant material, didgeridoos, for example, or shakers, rattles, but they're not going to allow you to hear the clarity and the number, the spectrum of the overtone like you would when the instrument is made out of metal. Discs, bells, gongs of all shapes and diameters, and singing bowls, etc., etc. Overtone singing, it's all about experiencing the magic behind the harmonic series. I'm going to show you harmonic spectrum analysis that I've done on some of my instruments. Here, it's a short video that I play. What you're looking at is the visual depiction of the sound of a singing bowl. So first, you will hear the sound as it is, and there will be some explication. But basically, each of these horizontal line is one harmonic. And the lower it is, the lower the frequency is. The thicker it is, the louder the amplitude. And as you go higher, it gets higher in frequency, and it gets weaker in amplitude. And when the singing bowl is played, we tend to not hear the higher harmonics very clearly. Some people can't hear them at all because they're overshadowed by lower, louder harmonics. Very important thing to listen to the modulation, which is the beating, the wavering, of how each harmonic has a different pulsation. One may be wow, wow, wow. A higher one would be wow, 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 wow. When you hear all of them together, listen to the interlocking of the beats. It's very fascinating. The next one is a Shruti box sound. This is not a video. If you want to watch the video, I have a lot of videos on my website analyzing sound, so please check them out. But this is the sound, the fundamental frequency, and the harmonics. And these are all the harmonics that you find in it. And the software that I'm using here is Isotope RX to show you the visual depiction of sound. You can also use Adobe Audition. This is 38-inch symphonic gong. You can see how densely packed these harmonics are here. And didgeridoo sound, here I'm playing it with certain breaks. Classical transverse flute, this is the classical flute, the silver flute. It's not used in sound therapy, although it's a beautiful instrument. Why? Because look at how loud the low note is, which is the fundamental tone. It overshadows the harmonics, so you don't hear them actually. And that's why humans don't gravitate to play instruments that don't exhibit to clearly audible level the harmonics. And this is my air conditioner. It also has harmonics. It's full of noise. But basically, the harmonic series is the best example of signal. And what working with the harmonic emitting instruments, clearly audible level, is about helping the individual to shift the noise to signal ratio, to clear out the noise that's in our brain. Here, I'm going to move to a different side of my research, which is telling you a little bit about how the brain works, the different brainwave cycles. So these are the neural oscillation or brainwaves, EEG, basically what we're going to talk about. So the brain has 5 gears. The delta state is when the brain is working on level of electricity of 0.1 hertz to 4 hertz. Hertz, of course, is cycles per second, which is a state that we experience when we're deeply asleep but not dreaming. Theta state is 4 to 8 hertz, meditative, drowsy, and drifting down into sleep and dreams. Alpha state 8 to 13 hertz when one is awake but mentally relaxed without any critical thinking. The beta state 12 to 30 hertz. Here, the brain is in an alert, busy, concentrating, engaged in activities. There's a lot of critical thinking, and it's a state that can cause mental fatigue, physical fatigue as well. The gamma state, which we discovered much later on, we didn't know it existed, is a state that goes on from 30 to 100 hertz and sometimes beyond 100 hertz, which is hyperbrain activity, which is great for learning and creativity. So now I'm going to show you some samples of EEG studies that I've done. This is my subject's baseline brain. Here, the subject is lying down, wearing a mask, not listening to anything. And I have electrodes on her scalp and forehead to measure the electricity. The part on the left is the left hemisphere, on the right is the right hemisphere. And the depth is basically time, which is a distance of about 6-7 seconds. Blue means that there's no electrical activity at that level. The brainwave cycles are on the bottom. You see 0, 20, 60, and 120 going up. Green color means there's a little more electrical activity happening there. And then red, yellow, and white are the highest peaks. So brain activity, thoughts, micro thoughts, show up in the EEG electroencephalography, which means we're measuring the level of electricity in different parts of the brain to understand what's going on in the brain, is basically measuring the monkey mind. So this is what the monkey mind looks like. Even though she's lying down, I'm not talking to her, she's not listening to music, there are a lot of micro thoughts happening in the head. This is the level of reality that's always in our head. The thoughts, the critical thinking, call that sometimes the mental diarrhea. So the good and the bad thinking, it's all there. So play large gong loud to certain loud sound for a couple of minutes and all the activities flattened. Here she's listening, she's paying attention. There is no reality happening in her brain. She's paying attention, just a little ripple here and there, but a big difference between this and that. Now, picked up small Vietnamese gong and nipple gong, played it, also quieted the mind so much. This is what these overtone emitting instruments do to our brain. They quiet the mind, literally and figuratively. Small Japanese bell played in high amplitude, loud dynamics, and this is low amplitude. Now, this is not discursive thinking. Here we have electrical activities happening in the lower end. Notice that I'm zooming in here. This is below about 12, 13 hertz and below, more so the left hemisphere than the right hemisphere. This is the limbic system being activated. The limbic system is the second part of the brain. The brain has 3 major layers. The innermost is the reptilian brain. The limbic system is in the mammalian brain, which is responsible for emotions. So here she's experiencing a lot of flurry of emotions and emotional state being evoked. And the third layer is the critical thinking area, where it's basically the neocortex, the gray matter, where critical thinking, problem solving, discernment, logic happens. So these instruments affect so much what the brain is going through. The frame drum, which has overtones as well, and here I'm playing it without any specific groove or rhythm. I'm playing it just in steady beats. Boop, 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 boop. And what this does to the brain, it creates synchrony, it creates coherence, which means both hemispheres are behaving in more or less a similar fashion. This can also get the person to go into a trance state Also, olfactory stimuli here, we have orange blossom water or neroli, can evoke emotions, and you can see what the brain goes through. Palo Santo takes it off the charts. So sound also affects our autonomic nervous system, which is divided into two categories. The sympathetic, which means the person is ready for something that needs to be done. Parasympathetic is a state of relaxation. That's the state that we go into when we're meditating, when we're sitting and in a contemplative state. If you're taking a hot bath and you're being present with your mind, or if you're receiving a massage and being present, you're helping your body to go into the parasympathetic state, to cycle down these thoughts, to really bring it into state of presence. And sound work helps us to go into that state, but assuming that we pay attention to the sound. So this is a binary system, on and off, basically. I believe that because of overworking and stress and not knowing how to attend to the body starts to go out of tune. The body is the most sophisticated instrument, which needs to be tuned on the physical, mental, emotional, energetic, and spiritual levels. So it takes awareness, and because it goes out of tune, we get diseases, mental and emotional disorder. And as we know now, number one cause of our misery and so many horrible things is stress, and stress management is so important, which is a very difficult thing. And so sound is the ultimate tool to work with that. Sound also affects the vagus nerve. Vagus in Latin means vagrant. It's vagrant because basically it starts at the brain stem, it goes through the esophagus, and then it attaches itself to every organ, where basically it's sensing what is going on. And when the person is feeling tense, then, as you know, our emotions are, we are affected. If we were going through stress or anything upsetting, we'll feel it in our abdomen. People say this is where you hold your emotions. Well, this is where the vagus nerve basically branches out, and it's the vagus nerve that is tense, and that's why this area gets affected. So diaphragmatic breathing, inhaling, letting the lungs expand without opening the rib cage, is a way of massaging the vagus nerve, because the vagus nerve goes through the diaphragm, the thick dome-shaped spongy tissue that separates the lungs from the organs. So it's a very healthy exercise to do diaphragmatic breathing. Let the lungs fill up with air, but let them push against the diaphragm, which pushes against the organs and stretches the abdominal walls out. So this is an inner massage to breathe in and breathe out without opening the rib cage. To bring some toning to the vagus nerve, people should look into the vagal tone and vagal theory. It's very big these days. And also sound affects the heart rate variability. Thanks to Heart Math Institute, we realize now that the heart is the one that controls the brain more than the brain controls the heart. It does so by altering not just how many beats per minute, but the equidistancy and the non-equidistancy. Is actually non-equidistancy. The beats are not equidistant, they're not equal in their interval. Look here, you see that one beat to another is 70 beats per minute and then 76 beats per minute. So these are always changing. And also the intensity of each beat, which is measured using volts, is different. So the brain picks up all of these nuances, these three variables. They could be other variables we're not aware of yet. We don't know, but and it decodes this communication, and the brain adjusts the entire body to suit what the heart is communicating, the good or the bad stuff. So please read more about Heart Math Institute, because sound affects heart rate variability tremendously. So there seemed to be some correlation between the cymatic patterns, the first row, these are the cymatic patterns on vowels, and various rosettas and mandalas, including the CERN accelerator, the Large Hadron Collider in CERN, Switzerland, and the cross-section of the DNA, that there is some patterns that are similar here. And I'm very interested in this. I want to talk a little bit about the esoteric side of sound, and then I'll come back to this fundamental structure and intelligence that is everywhere in nature and the universe. Esoteric side of sound is deep, and I can give an entire talk about this for many hours, but just to mention that it's not an accident that we find in all book religions, all Eastern philosophies, a lot of indigenous belief, the first thing that you're being told is that sound is God, sound is the creator of reality. In the New Testament, it's exhibited in that first sentence. In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The word here is a mistranslation of the concept of logos. For the ancient Greeks, the logos is the place where God comes from. Now, I'll expand on this a little later. Christ is the logos, not necessarily Christ himself, but when we reach Christ consciousness, to evolve our consciousness, to embody the intelligence, reflect, be one, be in resonance with the fundamental structure of the universe, the logos, is what evolving the person's consciousness to Christ level, not only for Christians, for any person of any faith. So Genesis starts with, the Old Testament starts with Genesis, which is something similar. I don't understand Genesis as, oh, it's describing how God created everything in 6 days and rested on the seventh day, which became the Shabbat. For me right now, what's the message is really is, on the first day, God said, let there be light, and there was light. You become God, you are God, if you learn how to create with your words. Universe was created with the primordial Aum. If I have some time, I can talk about what this literally means, or what's a reference of. The Big Bang, the ancient Egyptians tell you that the universe was sung into being. The Aborigines in Australia tell you that the universe was created with two songs. As you can tell, I not only bring into my research my training in music, but also a lot of stuff from my fieldwork in over 40 countries. The things I learned from having worked with close to 20,000 people. I often work with very large groups, up to 100 people. I collect data from them, my personal experiences, scientific studies. So I take a multidisciplinary, syncretic approach where there is synthesis to connect the dots. What I believe sound is about is to connect us to gnosis. This is basically the knowledge we acquire through our own experience, as opposed to knowledge that we are taught or believe in. Gnosis is conscious, experiential knowledge, not merely intellectual or conceptual knowledge, belief, or theory. This term is synonymous with the Hebrew Dat in Kabbalah, the Sanskrit Nya in Jnana Yoga is the yoga of knowledge, or Vidya, and the Tibetan Rigpa. This is the ultimate knowledge that we seek by going inwards. Spiritual practice is all about connecting to gnosis. The Gnostics, those who had thorough, rigorous practice to connect to gnosis, unfortunately, they were killed by the Romans and the early Christians, but they left us two very important texts. One became known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in Qumran by the Dead Sea in Israel, and the other one, the Nag Hammadi library, discovered in southern Egypt in the late 40s, which is the more important text. It's a text containing 53 codices, and very, very important, and you can buy it and read it. Nag Hammadi Library, N-A-G, another word, H-A-M-M-A-D-I. We're realizing that Plato's work is about music and harmonics. This is a great book by Jay Kennedy, professor of philosophy at the University of Manchester, England. The musical structure of Plato's dialogues. The dialogues are one of the most important work by Plato, another one, the Republic. Both of them are about sound, the logos, the mathematical aspects, harmonics. Why? Because Plato was a Pythagorean, and his teacher as well, Socrates. Socrates was thrown in jail, and he was forced to commit suicide by drinking poison because he was sowing impiety in the minds of his young students and people, giving them Pythagorean secrets. which the establishment didn't like this. So we're starting to uncover very, very deep, convoluted, hidden truths. And when we observe a lot of structures that were built with sound in mind, this is something that I've come across a lot in my field work. Just here, the ultimate, most sophisticated one, the Halsefliani hypogeum in Malta. Do some research about it. You realize that this here, what you're looking at, top picture is an actual picture, but the bottom one is a litter model, basically, how big this compound is. And it was dug in the bedrock, and archaeologists believe that it must have taken them about 20 years to dig it in the bedrock with basic tools. But the oracle chamber was fascinating, that if you say anything in the oracle chamber, the sound is amplified and one can hear it everywhere in the compound, in all of the chambers. So they use the natural amplification. Basically, there's connection between space and natural amplification, something process called Helmholtz resonance. And that's basically how we do the overtone singing. I'm going to demonstrate it here. What I do, basically, I move my tongue up and down to create a buccal cavity, vocal tract, to be of a specific size to naturally amplify one of the harmonics in my voice, so that you can hear the fundamental frequency in one of the overtones in my voice. And by opening and closing this buccal cavity, I can switch to the next harmonic up or down. And when I do that, it immediately takes me into deep meditative contemplative state. And this is what I believe, why I believe Tibetan monks do that. They just do it in a more guttural way, because it helps quieting the mind, taking out any of the noise, the static that the brain is creating, the level of reality it's creating, and it centers you, grounds you, establishes deep meditative, contemplative, introspective state. And Aum is about that. Aum, which you're going, Om, actually, Om is not Om, it's Aum, A-U-M. It's a reference to going from open buccal cavity to close, which means the vocal cords are vibrating, and the ah is a more open and oo is a more closed. So Aum, one cycles through the most open vowels to the most closed. And when I do overtone singing, I basically play around with this buccal cavity to naturally amplify that frequency using Helmholtz resonance. Okay, and it sounds as the following. This is the fundamental frequency sung by itself, and then I do the overtone singing. Ah, I can sing it on E or ooh. Now I'm going to sing it in a specific way. I'm going to bring out the overtones from my voice, and you will hear a drone of the harmonic, the fundamental tone, and then you'll hear on top of that the various harmonics, and it sounds as the following. There are many different ways of doing harmonic singing, overtone singing, or diaphonic singing. The Tuvan, the Mongolian, and there are various different styles, but they come down to just about the same thing. The more guttural one that you hear Tibetan singing, Tibetan monks vocalizing, is yet another way. In Shavin de Huentar, this is an archaeological site that's found in northwestern Peru by the Shavin people, pre-Incan civilization, who are known to use sound as well in conjunction with acoustical space, tunnels in temples, and sometimes with San Pedro as well, which is a hallucinogenic cactus based on mescaline. So these are things that the ancients were deeply involved in, basically unraveling the nature of consciousness and combining things together. I believe shamanism, which is an art, practice, philosophy of healing, revealing the nature of being, creating union with nature, with the plants, the intelligence in the universe, is a very sophisticated practice, approach, philosophy, system, whatever you'd like to call it, of using the two most powerful tools, which are sound, including music, and compounds, which are chemicals found in plants. They happen to be psychedelics sometimes and sometimes non-psychedelics. And this is why we find these sacraments, which is basically, they're done in a very contextualized environment. So the mindset is very important. I'll go over the mindset later. And the context is very important. And that's why we find shamanism everywhere in the world, which is the art, the practice of using the two most powerful tools to do a variety of different things: create therapy, healing, rehabilitation, education, regeneration, rejuvenation, rebalancing, reharmonization, creating union, finding harmony, basically, resonance with all living things, with the universe. When they don't know what's going on, then they talk about a variety of different things. And that's why you find each tribe having a different cosmological model, which means that's their own way of understanding what reality is about. But the truth is far more complex than that. And we're always reductionist with the way we approach things because it's based on how little we know, not counting how much we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. So also the Central and South Americans, Incans especially, use these Peruvian whistling vessels that are found in Peru. So there are various instruments that I use. Conch shell is another one that the Chavins used. Logos, ethos, pathos. I want to talk about these three things which I consider to be the fundamental structure of reality. The logos, for the ancient Greeks, is the place where the concept of God comes from. Logos is translated into many different things. Logos is what became the word. The logos is ratio. The logos is made of fields, phenomena, systems, patterns, ratios, symmetry. And we use mathematics, and especially mathematical constants, to understand it, but it's not made of mathematics. We use mathematics to understand it because mathematics is the most accurate, most precise science, language for us to measure, understand, fathom, transmit, experience things, to understand reality, to understand consciousness. And that's why physicists always resort to mathematics, and there are a variety of different mathematics. So the ethos is the distinguishing quality, the character, the personality, the philosophy. When we speak, we are speaking our ethos. We are speaking about what goes on within us, the feelings, emotions, thoughts, visuals, sensations. And when we choose the words properly, language creates reality, and we create reality by speaking it. Many people have said that the world exists because we have a language for it. There's a great connection between reality and words, language, consonants and vowels. If I have the time, I would go into what vowels are and what's the connection between consonants and vowels, and how T is a variation on E, and a P is a different one, and a D and C and a G. We are creating different waveforms. And when we speak the ethos, we're communicating what's going on inside of us. It's going from a level of very abstract to tangible level where we're using symbology. A word has a symbol. And then when the ethos is being heard, it creates pathos within the ears of the person listening to it. I'm going to demonstrate using Koshi chimes this concept very quickly and then move on. But it's something, again, I can dedicate a couple of hours in developing it, taking it apart. So here's one of the Koshi chimes, which I'm sure most people know. This is the Ignis, fire. By the way, it's not correlated to fire. These are just simple names. So the Ignis has specific notes in it. And these notes create intervals, musical intervals. And remember that in the intervals is where we have the mathematical ratios. So when you combine intervals together or notes together, we create harmony. So this sound, the ethos of this Koshi chimes, when you listen to it, I'm going to give you some time to let it sink in. Very often people describe the sound as feeling lighthearted, feeling joy, curiosity, childlike, it's whimsical, looking outward, hopeful, playful, all of these things, versus the aria chimes, koshi chimes again, air, has different notes, creating different musical intervals, different harmony, and different mathematical ratios. Sorry, got it short here. I have a lot to cover. A lot of people describe the sound as being introspective, contemplative. There's a sense of yearning, there's a sense of nostalgia. It's wistful. It's almost as if you're experiencing a cloudy day, rainy day, snowy day, and you are cozy indoors. It's different than the first one. So what causes this difference? Well, the logos in each one as the different variables and the intelligence of the mathematics. When you play it, the sound comes out with specific proportions, specific intervals, specific ratios. And when it's internalized and we hear it, right, it seeps into our being, and the sound eventually creates pathos. Pathos is not just something that's close to something sad. For me, pathos is the entire spectrum from really sad to all possibilities, all variables can be happy. It's a level of reality. So I believe that this is how sound shifts reality. We listen to music because it evokes emotions within us. Music is used in holy houses to allow you to feel the divine, whether it's the church bell or the Gregorian chants or the Byzantine chants, the Protestant hymns, the Adhan call for prayer, or Judaic chants, or the mantra system, the sutra system, the chants from any Eastern philosophy. All basically, all sounds eventually create an inner reality, which is projected. So this is my understanding of how sound really creates reality and why we seek sound and what we're seeking here. There's a lot of research on sound and medical and scientific aspect. Here is only few. The most interesting one, I'm gonna skip the other one, is that basically this image here, the last point, that microtubules, the microtubule network, these are the tiny structures that are basically very important to the transducing effect of consciousness. This is part of study that Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, who is an anesthesiologist and professor of anesthesiology, someone who is interested in what consciousness is and how it works, that these microtubules in the microtubule network actually vibrate sympathetically when we are subjected to non-equal tempered, here described as enharmonic vibrations. They, scientists don't have the musical language, but they said that music similar to certain kinds of Indian music. Well, it's all Indian classical music that's based on resonance, which is heavily influenced by Persian and Arabic classical music. It's the maqam system. It's the modal system. In India, it's called the raga system, which is basically non-quantized modes, like scales. They create specific emotions. Maqam is M-A-Q-A-M. I wish I have the time to give case study and play some examples of, Byzantine chants, classical Arabic, Persian, Turkish, and Indian music to allow you to understand how humans have been using this for who knows how long, centuries, if not thousands of years, building scales, harmonic systems that are based on the intelligence, on the tuning in the harmonic series. And now we quantize that. But this intelligence is still within us, and that's what makes us gravitate and use instruments that create these overtones to clearly audible level. Why? It seems to be it's about reharmonizing the self, readjusting, recalibrating, reawakening the harmony within us. Look at, I mean, the world is in chaos because of certain things happened where we have been overlooking. What, how else, we can justify that hundreds of millions of people came to do some amazing, wonderful things in the human experience? We still get to this point. Well, obviously we've been overlooking something, but if it's happening for us to learn something that cannot be learned in any other way. So I'm still hopeful, but it's very important to trust the process, to realize that our consciousness is going through a lot and we need this unraveling. And this is why we started seeing huge interest in sound healing, sound baths. I personally like to call it sound meditation, a word I didn't coin. It's been in use for a very long time. I like it more because it's more descriptive. There is active participation. Sound healing is a little nebulous. Some people are confused. They think, oh, just be subjected to sound and it'll heal you, or you don't have to do anything and the sound healer heals you with sound. There's a lot of inaccuracies. I like to be precise with words. As you've heard so far, how much I emphasize that sound creates reality, especially words. So sound meditation for me is really suitable because it involves the person in the experience. You're doing something, even if we don't talk about this, what sound does and what the process is about, that you're involved, you're meditating, you're paying attention, and that changes everything. And it's not by magic that sounds heal you. Yeah, sound can affect us if we're not paying attention, but the more we are focusing on the direct experience and not on our thoughts about the direct experience, the more the affect is happening. And that's been proven in my studies, is that attention, the spotlight of our consciousness, the mindset is very, very important. So the difference between a harmonic system, Western and non-Western, is I told you about it, is that the Western one became quantized and it gave us some advantages. We created wonderful music, but it's music based on quantization. The music, the harmony that we have is called functional harmony in the West, which is based on the harmony that came out of classical music, which was then used in jazz and then pop and rock and all other systems. But at the end is about piling on top of each other thirds. Music, you have C and then you pick an E and then a G, and that creates a major chord. If you want to create a minor chord, you take that E half step down to become E flat. And if you want to create the seventh chord, you add another third on top. So C, E, G, B flat, or B natural. If you want to create a ninth chord, you add a D, so on and so forth. You get up to 13th. So that's called tertial harmony because you're adding thirds. And these are quantized intervals. I'm not saying it's bad. We did wonderful things, but it doesn't seem to be the original harmony. And that's why over and over we resort to using instruments that exhibit the natural harmonic system, the harmonic series, which is the most powerful aspect of the logos. It's the one that creates reality, the one that creates reality through the ethos and pathos, the one that evokes feelings, emotions, thoughts, sensations, visuals. And this is why we use it in films. It's entrainment, basically. When you listen to music and you start to groove with that music, tap your feet on or hand, eventually that's called entrainment. It means the acoustics of the music that you're listening to is creating a lot of inner changes and you start to move in sympathetic resonance. So basically, we need to understand the power of sound so that we talk about something that's happening and not about something that's not happening, or so complex that we use a reductionist approach to describe something approximate to what's really happening. I'm really interested in being persnickety and understanding deeply. And as you know, I'm barely scratching the surface. I can go very, very deep into every slide I do, but this slide really summarizes what I'm talking about by Mark Nepo. To listen is to lean in softly with a willingness to be changed by what you hear. And the best way to receive sound healing or to listen to gongs, singing bowls, overtone singing, um, any music basically, but especially an experience with overtone rich instruments, we need attention. We need to focus on the variables. how high or low the frequencies are, how soft or loud they are, that's amplitude, the modulation, the beating, the alignment of the beating, how the beating changes as we play the gong differently or the singing bowls, all of these nuances, how we start to hear the very, very high harmonics that are overshadowed by the lower, louder harmonics, quieting the mind. This is what we mean by raise your frequency. It means uh, become aware of very subtle things. So it's very important to realize that sound is a dimension. Sound is a tool that we need to work with and not just to be exposed to. But what kind of work we do with it is really important. So I created specific protocol in using sound based on my life experience, my interests, my studies, my fieldwork, all the above and more I didn't talk about, to create an experience where I'm not only using sound, but I'm using other aspects to enhance what one can do with sound. So here are the elements of my protocol, and all of this information is on my website. Sound meditation is a holistic practice that combines a shamanic ceremonial setting with an Eastern emphasis on breathing exercises and visualization. The elements are the following: the mindset, very important thing, which is what we bring to any experience through which we experience anything: reading a book, having conversation, watching a film, taking a walk in the park, um, you name it. The mindset is not just intentions, it's intentions, attention, will, awareness, presence of mind, reasoning, discernment, belief, curiosity, intuition, inspiration, imagination, and sometimes passion. The setting, the safety of the setting, being in controlled setting, of course, where one can shield people receiving experience from unwanted sounds and smells and light, creating feeling of safety. Applying a meditative state or contemplative introspective state or mindful state. These are three different things. Breathing exercises to snap out of the habitual cognitive loops to allow the person to be more present. I do sometimes guided visualizations in visualization, guided perception or verbal guidance. This is how I guide people into perception, into listening deeply, because we take it for granted. We think that everyone listens to these overtone rich instrument in exactly the same way we do. No, no, not at all. There are a variety of different ways of listening and hearing. The type of listening that I'm promoting here is a judicious, attentive, and intentional one. Also do toning and vocalization in the beginning of the experience to quiet the mind, to allow the person to be affected by the bone and tissue conduction of their own voice. That's their voice traveling through the bone and the tissue of the jaws, of the skull and face, the head, the neck, chest, etc. Working with overtone emitting instrument and applying judicious equanimous listening, and working with olfactory stimuli to allow people to feel grounded, to enrich them, because it's also harmony, it's olfactory harmony. So the whole experience is about reawakening harmony within us and finding the logos within us again. And this is basically what I believe the fundamental problem of our species is, that we lost our connection to nature, to the intelligence of the universe, to our nature, to all living things. And working with sound is about reawakening the harmony, shifting to a state of harmony, reinstating a state of personal resonance, where healing, rehabilitation, education, all of these things are. And again, this is something I can go deeply into. These are some of the things that I share with people so that I tell them how to listen to things attentively. This is on my website, very important thing, not to take for granted that, oh, everybody knows how to listen in the most uh, efficient way. This is a little bit about some of the benefits of sound, which are also on my website based on my analysis and research. These are some very important things that I would like to share with people, because we work with powerful tools, sound, any powerful tool, whether it's yoga, meditation, breath work, uh, sound, etc., can cause a lot of problems for the practitioner, him or herself, and people, caused by ego inflation, spiritual materialism, spiritual bypassing, messianic behavior, pathological altruism, narcissistic spirituality, narcissistic humility, monobiblosis, something word I coined, which is the disease of becoming an expert after having read one book or after having had one experience. Please know where I'm coming from. This is not a judgment. This is just talking about the human condition and the entrapments of the egoic mind, which we need to be very, very careful. I have been very careful. I still am. And it's very important to learn about this, because if the person does not have good guidance, good teachers, or good self-awareness, the person can cause a lot of very complicated problem for him, herself, and the people they work with. So I'm going to stop here because I already covered a lot. Maybe I'll take some questions from David.
Wow, how expensive. Thank you so much. Wow. Um, there's a couple of things I wanted to mention and then ask as well. You know, we've created a whole program. We got $100,000 to create a whole program for 2 Montessori schools. We created 2,500 exercises. And I wanted to just let you know that we're, for the babies, we're actually playing just intonation music based on the harmonic series, you know, a tuning system. And I think that's really one of the number one things that has thrown us off since Bach really started using it, right?
Yeah.
And at way more than 432 or 440, right? Right.
Yeah.
And so because those mathematical patterns are throughout nature.
Yeah.
I mean, the distance between the planets, Fabian Maman says that it's even in the auras. I bet you that the harmonic series, which is 1 times 2 times 3 times, right, is in the chakras, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way God does sound, and
Yeah.
it would totally make sense, right? But my question is, kind of the most important aspect of your whole presentation, and that is, what's the best thing that will trigger the divine with sound?
Mm.
What's the hierarchy?
So basically, it's about realizing how to get out of the way and to tap into something that is within us. It's about the mindset, the attention, even paying attention to how one is paying attention to things, and getting the toolbox. And that's why I always give a talk in the beginning of any sound meditation I give, whether it's, I don't give sound meditation for less than an hour and a half because of writing different things, because I want people to go there with the right toolbox, the right way of paying attention, because they are the ones doing their own work. I have a function, the sound has a function, but we need to include people as active participants. So paying attention to things after I've given a talk about so many things connected to what I've given, but eventually tapping into gnosis, realizing that the knowledge unfolds from within. This is the divine is within us. Unfortunately, book religions, even though they mean well and they're great religions that can do good things in the world, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, but they took the divine out. I don't agree with that. The divine is within, and the gateway is gnosis, is the dot, is the rikpa. So sound, paying attention to sound, getting out of the way, the noise, the discursive thinking, the indoctrinated mind, the entrainment, the negative entrainment, the stress, the media, all of this, that's what I mean, getting out of the way, to be present and attentive, to allow the unraveling, the unfolding of what the sound does to us in sympathetic resonance. This is the best gateway. Pay attention.
When you're doing a sound bath, of all the different instruments you use, including the voice, what do you think is the number one that opens the portal to the light and the higher consciousness?
Again, the most important thing is the person's attention and mindset, but I use a wide variety of different instruments, and I bring awareness. I find the gong to be very, very powerful because how expansive is our perception of the harmonic series, but also the way I use my singing bowl set and a way I weave harmonies with each other as people are paying attention. This is not to say that the kosher cham is not powerful, or shruti box, the expressiveness of the voice, all are important, but what I found to be most powerful and effective is the presence and the audibility of the harmonic series as people are paying attention and navigating through that, perceiving the different clusters. And I use a wide variety of different mallets to bring out the different clusters of the harmonic series on a large diameter gong. And I use it in a very specific way.
Cool. You know, I've worked with the researchers that worked with Anna Weiss on, you know, all of the work she did before she died on how to use sound to access different brainwave states of higher consciousness, and she mapped out the brainwave states in detail. And you know, when I met with them, I said, well, you know, it seems like the number one thing is to be one with the universe.
The
And
logos.
and they said, no, there's one better. And I'm like, really? And they said, yeah, and you can see it with EEG actually. And that's when you're aware of you being one with the universe.
Oh, yes, I totally agree.
Uh-huh.
Yes, but that's what I mean, being aware of awareness itself. It is basically demystifying the biggest question, who am I? What am
Uh-huh.
I? There's
Right.
no bigger question. Who is the one labeling? Who's the one naming? Who's the one judging? Where is that voice coming from? And this is what we need to do the work. This is where the egoic mind, the one that separates us, the one that creates the reality. This is the difference between Atun or Atum and Shia in ancient Egypt, how consciousness creates the fallen from grace, the fallen God, the one that creates the one entrapped who forgot where one comes from, the connection between us and the divine. This is what ancient Egyptian knowledge, this is what R.A. Schwaller de Lubitz brought to us, that Graham Hancock and John Anthony West have been, and Robert Bovard have been talking about. This is ancient Atlantean knowledge. And this is what was reduced and became book religion. And now we fight, killing each other over which is the more correct way to worship Jehovah. That's basically degradation of consciousness. We lost who we are. And now Protestant, Catholic, Sunnite, and Shiite, and Muslim and Christian, unfortunately, kill each other about which is the more suitable way to worship the same God, or we kill each other over
Right.
whose God is more merciful. So we lost it because we lost our connection to the logos. We lost the awareness of who's having the experience. Yes, I do agree with your statement that you made. That is, who's having the experience? Who am I?
It's interesting. There's a lot of research I've come across on accessing higher states of consciousness by entraining different parts of the brain, even the tubules within the brain, to create different states of consciousness. You know about this research, right?
Yes, vaguely. Yes, I have read.
Uh-huh. Yeah. It's really interesting because, you know, I've gotten quite interested in using frequencies to activate the pituitary and pineal. And it's so funny because the different spiritual leaders that I've mentioned this to about my interest in this, they say, oh, you can't do that because a lot of people won't be ready. The Kundalini channels aren't open enough, and you can really cause some problems. But I'm still really interested because there's so much potential to take people out of depression or
Yes,
anxiety with brainwave entrainment that will entrain their entire brain to their natural rhythm of their
yes,
brain. I think that's the key to the natural rhythm, and not just frequencies, but combinations of frequencies across the brain that are flowing across the brain to the natural rhythm that actually happens when thoughts go across the brain already.
absolutely. No, I agree with you. And I think we need to do that. And we will learn what we need to learn in doing the process. There's something very important that I didn't talk about because it's already packed with so many things, which is called connectum harmonic. So the connectum is the wiring, the natural wiring in the brain. And Dr. Celine Atasoy, Atasoy, and her team are discovering that connectum, it works on level of harmonics, and there's cymatic patterns, waves that are uh, going across the brain. This is very, very deep and very important discovery that this is the tip of probably the biggest iceberg to allow us to understand what's really going on in the brain and connection between these patterns, the intelligence that's everywhere that our brain depends on that. Connectum, Connectom, harmonic.
Oh, cool, cool. The next stage that I'm really interested in right now, especially getting a lot of clarity on, is to find the musical flow, the melodic flow, and the even chord progressions, if there are, and the exact rhythm for each of the 11 systems,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So I have a friend of mine who's a major intuitive, and she's now like totally tuning into people's soul songs, right? So we're looking at how those soul songs and quality of flow within the music, which is very complex, but you can map out all the different parameters. I mean, and what different parameters of musical flow
Mhm.
are actually creating different aspects of higher consciousness or different aspects of flow for different parts of the system.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. I really appreciate your expertise and expansive knowledge. It's really, the amount of work you've done is really inspiring. And
Thank you very much. I wish I could communicate more, but as you know, very difficult things. Easy to talk about. One needs time, and we have to be succinct here. I've been creating a lot of recordings. Unfortunately, they're not on my website yet, but if people are interested, they can buy them direct from me. I do have few tracks posted on my SoundCloud, and people can check them out. I have 6 albums, and I'll be coming out with 10 new albums in the next 5 months.
mm,
If are interested in these, they can contact me directly on um, this email or soundmeditation.com, which is some of them are in 3D. So of course we lose a lot when we record overtone rich instruments, but my approach was much more thorough, consulting an acoustician friend of mine, someone has PhD in acoustics, what is the most suitable way to record the gong, how many microphones involved, what kind of microphones and what kind of distance, what is the directionality of all of this. Basically, persnickety when it comes to recording these immensely hard to record instruments. As we know, tone color is the hardest thing to record.
cool. I can
Uh,
help there. I
thank you.
wrote the #1 selling book in the world in audio recording. So if you need some help,
Thank you
love to
very
help.
much. Yeah.
So what's the package that you are offering?
The package, meaning what?
The offer for people here that are listening? Do you have a package that you're offering for people for the conference?
Not quite sure whether
Oh,
if I'm offering some program or meditation, you mean?
yeah, in association with the conference. Maybe you're not. Maybe you didn't do a package,
I
a
didn't
special
do
offer, special.
I have very limited time. Unfortunately, I have 3 upcoming trips that I'm planning and a lot of things. So I'm not offering a meditation. I would have loved to, but my time is really, really tight. But I wanted to contribute to at least a talk. Um, but people can go to my website, and it has a lot of
Cool,
great goodies and content, a lot of freebies and sound. So that would be my package.
cool, great. I appreciate it. So go ahead and stop sharing your screen. You might have to make me the host again so I can play the final closing video. Right, great. Let's see if I can share it. No, yeah, make me the host. Wow. Oh, go to the participant list and make me the host. You see it? So you have to make me the host.
No, it's actually on your end. I can't make you a host.
It says I'm not the host.
Yeah,
Host and disabled. So
that's on your end. I can't do that.
Participant, you're still the host. So go to the participant list and click on my name and click on more and change me to the host. I knew you. I knew you. I knew you. There we go. We got it. Cool. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll play the final closing video now. Take care.